Welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. I'm Aaron, 20-year Marine Corps veteran, and I'm here with my brother, Tim. He's my middle brother, and I love him a lot. We talk all the time, but here we're talking for the first time on a podcast. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, as you just stated, I am your next younger brother. We have another younger brother, but I'm the one in the middle. And as a middle child, I definitely have a different different perspective on life than my other two siblings. But Aaron and we have rekindled our sibling rivalry. I don't know. It's not really a rivalry. Sibling love, our fraternal love for one another, especially since you've retired from the Marine Corps. But about me, all my kids grew up. They gave me grandkids, and my wife and I said, "Hey, let's move to Missouri. We'll buy 11 acres that nobody has ever lived on, and we'll start building stuff and doing stuff." And so now I own a tractor, and so I'm a farmer. I've got livestock. I've had cows, but now I have goats. We have chickens and ducks, but we've had turkeys and geese and other critters as well. And we live off grid. We've got solar power, and we're building a cabin, and just got a lot of stuff going on. And I work in insurance, and I'm also a pastor. A lot of things going on.
Yeah. Well, we have that in common. A lot of things going on. Well, cool. Thank you for introducing yourself. And we talked about what rabbit hole we want to go down. And it ended up being whatever I wanted it to be. I think, you know what my favorite topic of all time is? Listening. Isn't that crazy? Listening. And how powerful listening is. Matter of fact, I've been listening to a new book, Born to Run. It was suggested in another podcast. And, it's amazing to me, going back to listening, how much you can learn from reading a book, And usually it's listening with your eyes when you read a book, but I'm listening to audiobooks, so I'm actually listening to the book with my ears. So it kind of seems to fit a little bit better. What do you think about listening, Tim?
Well, I've never been overly good at it until even recently. It is definitely something that has to be practiced, and you have to. It's kind of like anything that you want to do. You have to want to do it. You have to remind yourself you're doing it, and you have to be aware, that it's required of you, because everybody wants to be heard, but nobody actually wants to hear anything. But becoming a pastor has really helped me to slow down and realize that not everything that's going on around me is Tim centric. A lot of it, there's a lot of moving parts at any kind of ministry that you're in, and you've got to be willing to hear, and I mean really hear what people are needing, and where they're hurting, and where they have victories, and where they're doing good, and you've got to be willing to respond to those things based on their expectations, not based on your perspective. And so, yeah, I would not say that I'm good at listening, but I have gotten better. And I think it's kind of like anything that's worth doing is kind of a journey. So hopefully it's a journey that I stay on, and that as I move that direction, I get better at it. So, I mean,
yeah.
Besides audiobooks, listening for you, one of the things that I admire about you is your love for the people around you, and that you try to find their trauma and try to help them deal with that. And that's a big thing that I'm impressed with, your ability to hear the things where people are hurting. And I mean, because you've been doing this pottery and you've been doing other stuff. And at first I was like, what is wrong with him? But I mean, I really did. I mean, I thought, what is this, midlife crisis? I mean, you're my older brother.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me. I thought maybe it was just something that you were going through. But over the years, I've really developed an appreciation for it. So, yeah, I understand what you mean by that you like listening.
Yeah. Well, I don't like to listen. It's not my favorite thing.
What'd you say?
It hasn't been my favorite thing for most of my life. But it's growing on me. It's really growing on me. The stories that people have to share. You probably have stories I haven't heard yet. Maybe I'll hear them in the podcast. Maybe I'll hear them tomorrow when we talk about the podcast. I don't know. I mean, and not that you're keeping anything from me. It's just that we have so many stories that we don't have time. People don't have time to sit down and listen and find the treasures. We don't even, I can't, you probably had the same experience when you're just telling somebody, like, for instance, my story. Like, I think I let it slip out of my mouth a couple weeks ago. It's like, yeah, I had stitches 7 times before I was 7. And I hadn't even heard my own story about that in decades, you know? And for me to say that, I was like, and obviously they're like, what was it, abusive household or what was going on? I had a hard childhood. And it was like, no, I was just didn't care about getting injured. I just jump in the water, just slice by glass, just kick a motor while trying to jump over it, you know, stuff like that, riding the tricycle off the dining room table. So I have these stories that were not, I mean, if they were traumatic by me on myself, but I didn't know they would go that way. But eventually you get stitches and it hurts and you're like, well, I don't think I'm going to take such crazy chances anymore. And I get to learn that at the age of 7 instead of at the age of 50, like my peers.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I understand.
yeah. So what stories does Tim have that Aaron has never heard?
Well, that's
I don't know. I'll let you work on that. I'll let that simmer.
gotcha.
Okay, you let it simmer. But yeah, this listening thing. Yeah, I'm starting to. Well, what is listening really at its root? I'm thinking at its root, it is, paying attention. It is not just like paying attention with my mind and my focus, but like with my ears to listen to the audio. Sometimes, I won't understand a word somebody says, maybe in a dialect or even just from another part of the country. And I'm like thinking about it, digesting it. Well, they said this, like in a matter of seconds, I realized they just say the word home differently or whatever. And I realize what they're saying, but I'm working at listening. I'm struggling to listen. And when you think about it, every nerve is listening. Every nerve in your entire body is listening to something. The temperature, where this chair is, so I know the place to sit down on, where the table is, the lights shining on me, so I know that I'm showing up for the video, you know. So it's like there's a lot more to listening than just our ears. What do you think?
Well, I'd like to jump in on that. There's a Hebrew word in the Bible that's often translated to hear, but it's also translated to proclaim in other places. And the Hebrew word is Shema. And
Hmm.
part of Jewish prayer is Shema Israel. And we in the New Testament understand that when the Messiah was asked what the greatest commandment was, he said to love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your being. That's from the Shema. The Shema is found in Deuteronomy, and the word Shema doesn't mean to just hear; it means to listen. It doesn't just mean to listen, though. It carries the implication that we're supposed to listen the way that a person that is standing at the starting line for a race is listening for
You're
a
right.
gun. Like we're listening with the intent to act. And that is one form of listening. And that's the kind of listening I think that comes easiest for us is to listen with the intent to react. But the kind of listening that you're talking about is more along the lines of just listening with the intent to have peace, to intent to learn. You're not listening from what I understand what you're saying. If I'm wrong, you can correct me, but it sounds to me like you're talking about listening with the intent to just absorb what's being said, find some application, some truth, some compassion, some sympathy, some empathy with the person that's speaking, and being able to move forward with a level of unity that you didn't have before. And that's a hard type of listening. That's not easy to accomplish. That's the type of listening that I struggle with. I'm always ready to jump off the starting to listen with the intent to act. It's listening with the intent to do nothing more than just say, I understand. And to weep with somebody, to rejoice with them, to do those things. That's not easy.
Yeah. 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 As a matter of fact, like on some other previous podcasts, I kind of put listening in levels theoretically. Like you got listening to argue, a really low level where you're just listening long enough to find something they say wrong and fire back. Then I think there's, and this is all my theory. So I think there's listening to help, where some people are listening to the point when they can offer a solution or some kind of help. And I'm not saying any of these are bad. They're just different levels. And like I think about listening to understand was what I would think would be the highest level. Listening to understand, where I'm listening to Tim to know more about Tim. So if you get angry or if you get sad or if you are excited, like I want to listen and make sure I understand what you're saying because I get to understand you better. And so that's listening to understand. And even higher than that is listening to understand, and well, understand how or understand why, you know, and we're talking about existential listening, like listening to mankind, listening to Tim to understand how it is for all humanity as well. Another piece of all humanity. Not that, God forbid, every human is like Tim, because, I love Tim, but I don't want more than one of Tim. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you and me both. I don't think the world could handle two of them.
But anyway, so I digress. But yeah, so it's like listening to, for instance, I listen now. The thing I'm listening to lately is, why do I have legs that are this long? I'm listening to my body. I mean, it's not talking to me with an audible voice, but I'm like listening with my eyes, like, oh, my muscles are over here and over there. Huh. And there's tendons that go down here. Wait a minute. I think this muscle is primarily for running, for lifting heavy weights. So it's kind of like listening to the form and the function. And because I think you hear the artist, God, in the very atoms of everything he's created, right? He's involved in all of creation. Jesus says he is involved in all of creation. He was there. And so it's like you get to see their handiwork. You get to see the signature, the fingerprints on the art. And so yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I went down about 100 rabbit holes. So yeah, it's your turn. Anything there that you want to talk about?
Well, I like what you said about listening to your own self, listening to your body, like you were talking about your legs. I think that we oftentimes the person that we listen to the least is the loudest voice in our life, which is ourselves. We don't listen to
Yeah.
what's really going on. We don't ask ourselves, why am I angry? No, I mean really, why am I angry? Why am I sad? Why am I happy? Why, we
Yeah.
we kind of accept these things and we move forward with whatever demeanor that we find ourselves in, with whatever position we find ourselves in, and we never really ask ourselves. And you're talking about the physicality of your legs, but there's so many times that we really need to ask ourselves, why am I going to these places? Why are my
Yeah.
why are my feet pointed in these directions? And I'm not talking about the good things we do. I'm talking about the destructive things we do. Why am I
Right.
why am I angry with my spouse? Why am I angry with my kids? Why are my feet pointed in this direction? And that's not an easy thing to wrestle with, because I don't think that we really want to know these truths. And so it's really, we have to force ourselves to listen. And that's one thing that a good partner, a good spouse has for us, is that they provide that sounding board that you need. Sometimes you don't know why you're angry, and you don't even want to ask yourself, so you have somebody else ask you. And
Mm.
that's when they ask you, and you're forced to confront these things. Now, are you going to hear what you have to say? Are you going to lash out? What are you going to do? Well, if you have developed an ear for listening, especially to yourself, then you're going to be honest, and maybe you'll grow past that point. And it's the only way to grow past that point. I know one of the conversations that you said you want to talk about was narcissism. That idea, and that we're all a little narcissistic, if we don't listen to ourselves, then we get stuck in that rut. We get stuck in these.
Mm.
So I really like what you had to say about asking your legs the questions you were asking them, because that's one aspect of that. You know, why am I sore? What can I do to improve my physicality? What can I do to improve my emotional state? These are questions we could ask ourselves, and we will answer those questions. But will we hear the answer?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, but and also I want to talk about a little bit of how to here. So we're talking about listening to yourself. I want to make a list of the equipment I need. Oh, wait a minute. Do I need a microphone? No. Do I need a house? No. Do I need a car? No. Do I need clothing? Well, no, because it's just myself. But it would be weird if I was out in public. But yeah, so maybe clothing. But you go down the list of things you need to listen to yourself. And the main thing on the list is the thing we don't give ourselves, and that's time. Distraction free time. You know, and that's why am I talking about listening? Because I as you I love this term you said, forced listening. And that's another level. I'm not sure where that fits on the listening to understand, listening to argue, forced listening. It sounds a little violent, but I mean, I like the idea of that's been the best periods of listening in my life is the forced listening. Is the listening where it's like, I want to do this and this and this. No, you twisted your ankle. You're going to sit at home with a cast on for 6 weeks. I don't like this. I don't want to be bored. I don't want to be forced to listen to myself, you know, and this is from my earlier life, in the Marine Corps, injuries and not just injuries though. Sometimes you're like, I really want to do this and the money doesn't show up or the money has to go to something else. It just pops up. Or I really want to buy this, you know, I tried to buy one of the Skylink antennas, the whole system, from a guy. And I was like, he's not messaging back. I'm sending him half of the money up front. I'm worried that it's just like any other Facebook marketplace interaction. The guy's long gone to some other country in the world. But he did message me back and he said he's in the hospital and he'll send me a refund. So, but in that moment, it's like what I want a Skylink thing now. My internet stinks now. Jill's got college. I've got a podcast. I got stuff I got to do. I got video games I want to play too. I got all this stuff and I want it now. And it's like, nope, you're going to wait. As a matter of fact, you're going to wait and listen to why you want all that stuff. Oh, well, I don't want to do that. I'll almost do anything to get away from that. Is there anything anywhere I can do? Man, I'll even do the dishes to get away from that. But I'm learning that I'm being blessed in the way that I've been pinned down and forced to listen to myself at different times by waiting.
So,
And go ahead.
you said something that I really want to key in on about the Starlink thing and the guy in the hospital. What I
Right.
hear from what you're saying is that sometimes we don't listen. We listen to what's being said, but we don't listen to what's not being said. You gave this guy this money, and instead of asking yourself why he wasn't responding, you were obsessed over what he might be doing instead. And the fact is the guy was in the hospital, right? He was needing somebody to listen to what he couldn't say. And so, how often do we get wrapped up in something that we're doing that we have a goal? I mean, we've already marked it down. It's written in ink somewhere, and we think that we understand the direction we're supposed to go. We think we understand how we're supposed to get to that goal, but we're not listening to what's not being said. And when things don't go our way, instead of listening to what's not being said and being compassionate and sympathetic and patient, we end up just tearing our own lives up emotionally. We end up stressing about things, which is not healthy. We end up getting depressed because we spent money that we don't have, or we basically get ourselves in an emotional funk because we're not, instead of listening to what's not being said, we're just, all we're hearing is a white noise of life. And I mean, I know that there's been times that I've reached out to people like you and found out they were in the hospital, and I felt horrible that I got so stressed out about something petty when they were actually dealing with something real and hard. When I fell off the roof and
Right.
broke my leg, to me, I felt like my life was over. About 2 weeks after I fell off the roof and they told me I'd never walk again, there's a guy that lived down the street and he went into the hospital and had one of his legs removed. And I
Hmm.
went and visited him in the hospital. And all of a sudden, I was like, wow, I need to pay attention because
Right.
there's things that aren't being said in my life. And I'm not trying to hear them. I'm just trying to hear my emotions, my wants and desires that aren't going to be met. Sometimes we got to stop and listen to the things that aren't being said.
Well, I like that. I like that a lot.
Well, that
I had a
actually
couple
comes from
thoughts.
Tina. She contributed things that aren't being said. We need to listen to those.
Okay. Cool. I appreciate you giving credit to
My
her.
wife Tina is sitting here. For those that are listening, she's sitting here next to me.
Yeah. Listening. Well, and that made me think about listening to what we can't see, listening to what we don't see,
Right.
right? Knowing what we don't know. I mean, there's a whole realm of world for all of us of unknown. And it's listening to what we can't see, where we're not focused, and so often we're focused, I don't know, somewhere else. We're distracted and we're not thinking about what we can't hear, right? All the possible things. Well, that led me to, I was trying to find where I was thinking with that. I was thinking about gratefulness and not listening to what is sitting all around you at all times, right? The latest thing I've said is, well, I think I read it somewhere, but it is basically, if you're a little depressed or sad, get a pad of paper and just start making a small list of all the things you have. You can start at your pinky toe and work your way up, and then look around yourself in ever widening circles. And by the way, you don't have enough paper
Right.
because there's so many good things, right? And we're not accounting for all the good things. We're not accounting for a hand that just seamlessly works together to grab, fire a pistol, throw something, throw a frisbee, text on my telephone, on my smartphone or whatever. It's like so seamlessly everything works. I was talking to somebody recently and he was like, I'm sad. I feel like if you don't have disposable income, then you have a bored life and you're just going to expect nothing more than that. And I was like, well, you're not poor. I mean, you got priceless equipment in your body, number one. I mean, he's like, what are you talking about? It's like, you could just read something and sell audiobooks. You could just play games with your fingers on your smartphone and make a little money, apparently, supposedly, if it's not a scam. I don't know. But you have a fully functioning, they're trying to make robots to do a fraction of what we do, and you spend money to buy them. And you have something that just works perfectly already. I haven't needed one update of my software, and I'm doing pretty darn good, right? I haven't needed one software update. I haven't needed any modules to be repaired or replaced. I didn't need new legs. I mean, maybe I'll need new hips when I'm 80. I don't know. I'll become the bionic man. I'm okay with that. But at the same time, it's funny out of the box what you have sitting here. And you're using your hands. You're using your eyes. You're inspecting houses. They're giving you money to use your body to help them,
Right.
right? And even if you got a busted wing or you got a broken leg and you can heal up, you can go out there and you can do some other work. So,
I find that listening is kind of like having a flashlight when you use your listening skills, and you're talking about a lot of different things that we need to listen to. And it reminds me of walking. We homestead, and we when we first moved on our property, we had no lights anywhere. Now we have like solar lights up all over the place, and so when we walk around at night, where we walk, lights come on automatically while we're walking. But at first, we didn't have that. We had our phones with a flashlight, and if you sit there and pointed the flashlight at your own feet, at your own self, then you might run into a tree or trip over something because you're not looking ahead of
right,
you. You're not looking around you. But if you pointed your flashlight all around you and didn't ever point it at your own feet, then you're going to trip over something at your own feet. Basically, the idea was that you had to keep the light moving and point it in the direction you're going, point it at your feet, point it around you to make sure somebody didn't, another animal or something didn't sneak up and knock you down or whatever. It was like you were constantly moving the flashlight. You weren't moving it quick. You were just moving it from feet to forward to sideways. Oh, I saw something move. And that's how our listening needs to be. It doesn't need to just be on me. It doesn't need to just be the guy that you're talking to. You need to be transitioning it. You need to listen to you. You need to listen to other people. You need to listen to the left and to the right. You need to be aware of what's going on around you the same way you would if you were walking through a room at night and all you had was a light. Your eyes need to see everything. Well, your ears need to hear everything too. And that's the only way that you're going to make it through anything. You're going to overcome your own obstacles, but it's the only way that you're going to be able to ever lift anybody else up or understand what other people are going through, because our world is so finite. Like, my experiences are limited to me, and your experiences are limited to you. And if I want to know you and if I want to study you, then I'm going to have to shine that light on you every once in a while. And I'm going to have to introduce my world into yours and your world into mine. I joke around with people and I say that, I'm going to the school of Tina. She's my wife and I am going to the school. And people joke back and they say, well, you should have graduated from that school a long time ago. And I said, oh, yeah, I've got all kinds of degrees, but I'm just trying to get the next one, because that's what makes our relationship so great, is that my finite world and her finite world, well, by being together, we've expanded the world. Our world, my world, is expanded by her experiences. Her world is expanded by mine.
At T-Code hand-forged knives, every blade tells a story, starting with my dad's 1965 fastback Mustang. The steel from iconic American cars, including that Mustang, lives on in each knife, crafted with precision and care. As a mechanical engineer, I combine history and engineering for unmatched durability. Every T-Code knife is hand-forged and comes with a lifetime sharpening guarantee. Want something unique? We offer customizations in design, etching, and coatings. T-Code hand-forged knives, where craftsmanship, legacy, and precision meet. Find us on Instagram at TCodeMFG, and let's build something that lasts.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We'll be right back in a minute, but first I want to tell you about some new exclusive access on our Patreon. So if you join as a member to Patreon, you can get access to Give Us Rabbit Holes through an exclusive Discord chat room. Also, we're going to be airing exclusive for Patreon member only episodes, full episodes. Let's get back to the program.
And so many marriages fall apart because people don't listen. They don't allow their world to be expanded by the one that they're married to. And I know this. I mean, you know this as well as anybody. I haven't had a 100% success rate on relationships, but I have in this one, and it's because of this idea that listening is like a flashlight. You got to keep an eye on the things that are important. You can't just watch your own feet, but you can't just look out into the horizon either. You got to keep track of everything, and it's literally a juggling match. But it's important that we listen to one another, that we listen to ourselves, and that we're able to incorporate other people's lives and experiences into ours. So, yeah, I thought I'd just throw that out there. It kind of
that's good.
Kind of pertinent, because you were talking about listening to yourself and you're talking about listening to others, and a lot of people would look at those things as like mutually exclusive. They're opposed to one another, but no, it's our lives and our abilities are designed to where we don't have to focus on one point. Can you imagine if while you were driving you only focused on one point all the time? How many accidents would you get into before you realized you had to look around a little?
Well, if you get into a lot of accidents, parallel parking.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I like what you said. The word I thought of was scan. So you're just kind of scanning, right? You're scanning with the flashlight, or you're scanning with your eyes, scanning with our ears. And I think it's so amazing that, like, our subconscious, in theory, is scanning our environment. And it, to some extent lets us know, hey, you're on fire, or whatever, you might need to know. it pops like a warning up, like a light on your dashboard. Check engine. But you have pain in your shoulder, it's a light. Check your heart. You know, so on and so forth. Referred pain and all this stuff. And it's like there's so much we're not paying attention to. Our attention is such a narrow band, right, of focus, of sight or of hearing. And so, yeah, but here's what makes it narrower. Here's a few things that work against listening. And you can probably agree with these are pretty common, like being distracted does not help listening. If I'm on my phone and you're talking and I'm like even playing a game or something, I'm not even picking up a fraction of what you're saying. And if you're angry, I'm probably picking up less, right? I'm distracting myself from you, because my attention's somewhere else. And it's the same thing, like with your hearing. If you're listening to something in your headphones, if somebody comes up and try and talk to you, and we know what the polite things are to do. And we would never wear our head. If somebody comes up, let's say our boss or our wife comes up to talk to us and we have our headphones on, we're going to take them off. So what'd you say? I'm sorry. Because it might be really important. Anything our wife has to say is really important, and that's what you find out also by listening. As you're an expert at, well, at least I don't know what title you give yourself. In my mind, you're an expert at listening to Tina. And the same thing with Jill. Like if they have something to say, I'm shutting out all distractions and paying attention and listening. Now, if Tina talks, then I don't listen, but I'm not married to her, right? Well, actually, I do listen because she's kind of just like me. I know what she's thinking right now, as a matter of fact, but I'm not going to say it
Yeah, that's probably
because
safe.
this is not an explicit podcast. So this is for kids, so I can't say. I'm just playing. But anyway.
Woo!
But yeah, so distractions are the biggest thing, gets in the way from listening. Sometimes distractions make you listen better, like a good joke, right? And everybody's laughing. And they're like, man, I really get what he's saying now. So you can help listening and you can hurt listening by where you focus your attention. And, think about pay attention. And this is the last rabbit hole before I take a breath and let you say something. But yeah, when you talk about pay attention, it really is something you pay to others and to yourself. I mean, and when you think about paying, it's like valuing something so much that I'm going to give you some money for it. I'm going to give you something that I worked really hard to get. I'm going to trade that with you for your attention. And I'm going to give you my attention as a gift. I'm going to pay it to you and maybe pay it forward. And, listening is like that. Like if I pay attention to somebody and they're, for instance, you can ask the question, how are you? Good. Okay, great. See you later. Or what does good mean to you? What does good look like? Does good mean you had a good cup of coffee and a good breakfast? Does good mean your dog kissed you before you left? You had a good dream? Does good mean you have a bad dream? You don't want to talk about it. What does good mean for you? And, and that's next level, what I would call active listening plus. But anyway, sorry. Now it's your turn. What do you think about?
Well, no, I like what you had to say about the whole generic good answer. How often do we give that? How often do we hear it? And it's more often than not, it's actually a dismissal. Somebody when somebody says that they're doing good, what they're saying is either that they don't have confidence that you're going to understand and be sympathetic to their situation, or that they just really
Right,
don't have time to talk to you about what's really going on. If you ask me how
right.
things are going and I'm like, they're going good, and you ask me to elaborate, then all of a sudden you're investing. And it's like you said, attention is a currency. And when you pay attention to somebody, you invest in who they are. And if it's a worthy investment, there's a lot of things we invest in. I spend hours every day taking pictures of houses for insurance companies. It's an investment. I get a reimbursement from that on a biweekly basis. They give me money every
Yeah,
other week. But when I invest in my fellow man, when I invest in my wife or my kids by paying attention to them, then what I get out of that is their experiences. How does that benefit me? Well, one way it might benefit me is somebody says, hey, I went fishing down here at this one place and I caught just a basket full of bass. Well, then all of a sudden, I have the opportunity to learn from their experience and benefit from their experience, from listening to them. So that's an investment that pays off. But how many times do people advise us or tell us about their lives, and because we're not paying attention, we fall into the same trap that they just climbed out of?
Yeah.
I mean, that's life. So I like a lot about what you had to say. Paying attention. Attention is a currency, and it is a currency
Yeah.
that when it's spent, it's an investment that repays itself so many times over. Learn
Right.
so much when you pay attention to what people are telling you, especially people who've been there and done that before you, that went before. And this is why when you mentioned earlier that you've been reading, that's not a hobby, that's an investment. You're paying attention to what
Right.
somebody else thinks. You're investing into their world, in their little finite flashlight beam. You're investing in that. You're getting inside of that, and it makes your world bigger. We talked about the Bible a little bit. Invest in that. There's a lot in there that tells us how our lives can be better. I mean, all of it was given to us.
Yeah.
None. A lot of people look at the Bible as like some sort of weight that we have to carry around. Oh my goodness! Don't lie. Don't commit adultery. But the truth is all of these things that are in the Bible are actually given to make our lives better. Trust me, if you don't commit adultery and don't lie, your life is going to be better. If you don't go around murdering
Absolutely.
people, your life's going to be better. If you just do the
Right.
things that are commanded in Scripture and don't look at them as commands, look at them as wisdom, then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you'll make better choices and you'll learn from the experiences of all that went into writing the Bible. And this isn't just the Bible. I've read actually, because of your influence, my older brother, he one day was telling me, he was reading books, and I was like, what kind of books do you read? Like, are you reading, this latest book from this famous author? And he's like, well, no, I've been reading a lot of nonfiction. And in my head, I thought, oh no, he must have been shot. There's something wrong with him. Who reads nonfiction? I didn't even think that was an option. Do they have nonfiction books still?
That's
So
the
I
part of
went
the
out.
library I never went into.
Yeah, I went out and I got a book, and it was the biography of Frank Phillips, who is the founder of Phillips 66. And there was so much in that book. It was just jammed packed full of this very, very successful and wealthy entrepreneur that basically founded an entire chain of gas stations and marketed liquid propane all by himself. And these gas stations are still around today. Phillips 66 gas stations. This guy came up with this and did all of this, and his experiences and what he did, his political views, all of these things that shaped the person he was. All of a sudden, I introduced myself into that little flashlight of his life,
Right.
and I was
Right.
like, it opened my eyes to so many different aspects of life that I had no idea about. And so I can honestly say that reading these books and understanding, just taking a glimpse of somebody else's life, especially in writing, is such a good thing. My wife recently, and I'm not plugging her books by any means, but
You can.
my wife, she started writing books. She's written a couple of books now. They're children's books. They're talking barnyard animals, and they're about animals that we've had on our farm or even still have on our farm. One of them's called Whiny, and the other's called I don't remember. Buster. The Ozark Shepherd. Ozark Shepherd series. You can probably find them on Amazon. The deal is that I love the fact that she's writing these books. If nobody else read them, if nobody ever ordered these books, they're just on Amazon. And she got, of course, some copies for herself, and my grandkids read them. Them grandkids that I
Yeah.
have that may have never known me, may have never known Tina, may have never known about our experience here. Well, now they have the opportunity to learn. And it's all written
Yeah.
at their level where even our younger grandkids could read them. And then now all of a sudden, our experiences aren't just something that if they didn't listen to it the first time, they've lost it. Now our experiences are something that they can read it and reread it until they learn the art of listening and they
Right.
introduce themselves into our little flashlight, our little finite lives.
Right.
And so, I mean,
Right.
you recently have written some books, a book of poems with some of your watercolor artwork. And
Yeah.
you talked to me about it. And at first I was like, poems? I mean, I've got a beard. I'm
Right.
not going to read
I
poems.
know. I know. I know.
But then,
I
but
know.
then I was like, what I really need is I need to hear what Aaron has to say. And so I got the book. And Aaron was like, you could just put it like, on your coffee table. Maybe somebody would look at it and think it's got pretty pictures. And there was a poem in there that it moved me emotionally. It not only drew me to a place emotionally where you were, but it brought me to a different place than what you had ever been, because it spoke to me in a
Right.
different way. But it made me, it allowed me into your world and allowed me to understand some of the things about you that I didn't already know. And also it it spoke to me and deepened my experiences. And so these things are
Yeah.
not petty things, they're not little things. Listening is not a little thing, and inviting yourself into somebody else's world by just hearing what they have to say, and allowing some small part of that to play the organs, the ivory keys of your life, and make a melody that you've never heard in your heart.
Yeah.
That's an amazing experience. And it's something, like you said, that anybody can do, and we all take for granted. We're not, how wonderfully are we made that I can introduce myself into your life by reading a poem that you wrote. But that's how we were created. We were created to need that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. There's a lot in there. So many rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And also, like, I got, you talk about my poem. I'm a little bit touched
You're a little
by
verklempt.
that. But yeah, I was thinking about the listening to invest. Listening is investing attention, like a currency that you said. And I thought about it a little bit further down the line, and that's like right when it's happening. But I was thinking about, and it builds intimacy, and it builds relationships, and all of a sudden you have a network of people that are listening and caring about each other, and that are really listening, not just like, how you doing today? Good, good, bye, bye. No, but ones that are like, so what happened yesterday? What do you mean? Well, you were going to sit down and check your email. Did you find anything interesting? I mean, I don't want to get too nosy with my theoretical example, but it's like people that care about each other. Like, what's going on with your sister? Yeah, she's in the hospital. Oh, she got out yesterday. And it's listening. And it's like, well, what's her prognosis? Well, you guys, do you need any eggs? Or do you need some ice for her treatment? Or, what can I do to help? Oh, you don't have a bed for her? Oh, I've got an extra bed. And as you listen, you start seeing that, wait a minute, some of the things I have, maybe they're not just for me. Maybe they're for someone else to use too. Maybe they can borrow my mower. Maybe I can borrow their chainsaw. Wow. We both saved hundreds of dollars. Not only that, but when you borrow and return it, it builds a relationship, because I'm listening to their rules. I'm listening. I'm looking at their chainsaw and I'm like, wow, that's well oiled, ready to go. Or it's rusty and I've got to fix it to make it work. Either way, I learned something about that person, and so it's not just listening, it's listening to how they treat their stuff. It's listening to how their car's running. As you get into their life, you get to understand who they are and what makes them tick. And oh my gosh, the biggest benefit I have ever found to listening is you just get these amazing stories from people. Like, so many good stories that are so useful. Stories, I heard something that stories is the main way we learn as humans, is by telling stories. And it doesn't matter if you tell a story if nobody's listening. Well, I guess I'm listening to the story that I'm telling. So it always is going to matter. So it's just so interesting to get, I got so many stories from you, you know, so much of what's going on for you and what's going on in your mind and where you're at. And, you're growing into this area, of listening. It's not new, but you also say you're not good at it. So you realize there's even more to learn about listening, which I also realize, which is why I keep bringing it up, because every time I talk about it, I ask the question and I listen and I learn things I've never even heard of before or read or heard in anybody's life every single time. So That's really what this podcast is about overall, is just sitting down with people, having them a guest on the podcast and listening to them. What do you think about that?
I think
Surprise.
I think you're right. I think it's like a public service. I mean, you're not just enriching your life by having these people come on and talk to them, and you're not just enriching their life by asking them questions and giving them your perspective, but you're enriching the lives of those who've never met you or your guest. You're
Right.
and I'm not by any means conceited enough to think that I'm this great fountain of extreme wisdom that people can't live without me or something. But maybe I'm going to say something. Maybe you're going to say something that will
Right.
change somebody's life. And this is a platform for where those things can be said. It's not about how big I am or how big you are. It's not about how big your next guest is or your previous guest is. It's about the need of the person hearing it. And that's how listening works. Listening is great. I mean, I listen to you and that probably makes you feel good. And you listen to me and I know that makes me feel good. But listening's really great for the
Right.
person who actually does it. When I listen to you, it might make you feel good. But if I learn something and it improves the quality of my life, even 1%, that is such a huge blessing. And so why have a podcast? Why do these things? Why have Bible studies? Why ask somebody for prayer requests? Because in doing so, you give somebody an opportunity to touch your life as much as you touch theirs. And I like what you had to say about stories too. I mean, it's 100% true. We look at scripture and there's a whole lot written, say in Deuteronomy about thou shalt and thou shalt not. We just got like, but we get to the New Testament, and what does the Messiah do? He does a completely different thing. He tells parables. Like, oh, there's a sower, and he's got this grain, and he throws it out, and some of it lands here, some of it lands there, and then
Right.
all that same stuff that you read through was just like, oh my goodness, what a burden. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, I found application. Here we go. Now I'm learning something. Now I'm finding a way to take the things that I didn't like and apply them to my life and make my life better because somebody told me a story. And that's how he dealt
Right.
with it. And I mean, he even told his disciples the reason he was speaking in parables. And it was so that they would become smarter, and those that weren't ready to hear the truth, well, they would figure it out eventually. And I mean, it would be hidden from them until it was time. So
Yep.
I really liked what you had to say. I think you're right. I think people learn better. People learn better. You can learn more from a good joke than you can from a textbook if the joke is informative enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Stories. I am also learning from Jesus, the storytelling. Oh my gosh. I don't imagine how it must have been to really be there and see him talking about it and maybe leaving him on edge, and like, I don't know. I see modern storytelling and I kind of overlay that onto him, like where somebody's like, yeah, the other day, I got hit in traffic. I was flying through the air. And, what about those Dallas Cowboys? And people are like, finish the story.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And you're like, well, yeah. And then the other day, I was in a hospital and like, no, go back to the first story. Tell us, we want to know. And, they leave you in suspense, and you got this desire and this hunger, and the one thing you want to know in all of existence is the next part of that story or how that story ends. That's been my miserable existence reading this last book. It was so well written. The story of Born to Run. Oh my gosh. And I don't want to go into it in too great a detail at all, but yeah, he tells you something in the beginning about how his running and his form is off and how the doctor tells him to never run again, to go start bicycling. And in his mind, he's like, well, how did these people run before we had cars and, horses? There we go.
Yeah.
That's what I'm sorry. It took me a minute to remember horses. Before we had cars and horses, how did we get around? How did they hunt animals? And so he had this question. He's like, well, what's wrong with me? And what's right with them? And so that launches him on this long, multi-parted story, but it's about 7 hours in when he's like, let me tell you the next part of the story I started telling you in the beginning. And I'm like, finally, I even forgot how much I wanted to hear that part of the story, right? And so that gets you through the 9 hours of listening to this audiobook is the good storytelling. And, and then it's just like any good show on Apple TV or something. It's like, oh my gosh, now I can't wait. I'm finally going to see end of the episode credits. Like, no, okay, we got to watch the next episode. Like every episode, like they're good at storytelling to the point where you don't want to get up. You don't want to go to bed. I want to watch the next episode. Me and my wife have a life hack for that. We stop it 10 minutes before the end of the episode and you get to walk away at peace. So just for all my listeners for Tim, I'm letting you in on a secret. It's worked every time. If you stop it 10 minutes before the end, you can go to bed without being left in suspense. Almost every time. But since I mentioned life hacks, I wanted to talk about something else you said.
Sure.
Well, you mentioned that's life hacks. It's a common colloquial term for now for I'm going to save you a lot of time and effort and maybe money by showing you this little trick, right? But that's what the Ten Commandments are. They're like life hacks. They're like, by the way, you say you want happiness, you say you want peace. Well, by the way, if you just do these simple things or stay away from these things, then you'll have a life that's fun and meaningful and has relative peace, where everybody gets along and you get a big social network. And, these are kind of social rules for playing the game of being human. And if you can't at least follow these rules, then we don't like you. And we're going to do bad things to you, like prison and jail and maybe death. If you can't follow these rules of not killing everybody, not killing anybody because you're angry, not being jealous of other people, any one of the things on that list? It's not good for you. It hurts. It's destructive. You can watch your life swirl down the drain as you keep murdering people or as you are eaten up with jealousy or, on and on the list goes. And so, yeah. So to me, it's like life hacks. It's like, and once you start doing them, you're like, man, this is great. No drama. I don't have to remember what I said yesterday because I didn't lie. Wow.
Well,
What am I going to do with all my time? Go ahead.
one of the biggest rock stars of all time agrees with you. King David wrote all them Psalms. In Psalm 119, he says that great peace have they that love thy law, and nothing shall force them into sin. And so, you're absolutely right. The peace that the Ten Commandments or the law or the instructions of even the Messiah, Paul, all of these things that we find in the Bible sometimes they run against us. They were given to us as a life hack, so we can have peace. So we can have peace in our marriage, or peace with our siblings, or peace with our parents, or peace with our coworkers. Paul talks about, if you're a slave and you have a master, this is how you have peace in that relationship. That's a crazy thing for us to even wrap our heads around, that as a slave, you can have peace with your master. But he deals with all kinds of relationships. He deals with marriage, he deals with employment, he deals with our relationship with the government. And basically, he has a prescription, and that prescription isn't for wealth, it isn't for nice clothes and a fast car, it's for peace. Because really,
Right.
when life boils down to what's really the most important thing is that we can just find a little bit of joy in all the crap that's going on around us. We can just find a little bit
Yeah.
of happiness in our marriages and with our kids, that we can find contentment in the things we have, that we can enjoy our job well enough that we get up every morning and go to work, but hate our job enough that when we get off work, we don't just keep working, we go home to our spouses and our families and stuff. And so, it's all about balance, and that's what peace is about. It's about building up different things in your life. So yeah, I love what you say there. Ten Commandments isn't a burden for us to carry. It's just a bunch of really good, wise suggestions on how we can have a little bit of peace in our life, how we can have an easier life.
Well, and peace is such a weird word today in today's society. And I want to think about peace for a second. I know we're wrapping up, but I thought about what does peace look like for Aaron? And it's just being able to have fun like a child all the time. Happy to meet everybody, happy to play with anybody, whether we're playing blocks with kids or playing a video game with a teenager or, going for a walk or playing, cards with elderly people. It's like I can just play effortlessly with anybody at all times, just like a child, just, digging a hole in the sand. Simple, easy, effective, like relaxing, carefree playtime. And, because here's the funny, crazy thing that all of the Ten Commandments, those rules, so maybe we can encapsulate all of the Bible into this. It's like people think it is like the way to not have fun. It is the book of how to be the fun police. And certainly some people do interpret it that way. But it's actually the rule book or the suggestion book, however you want to see it, for how to live life like a child. You don't have anything to worry about in the future. You don't have anything to worry about in the past. You're just having fun playing with the Legos all by yourself and just having a blast. And if you're not careful, if you didn't have parents, you do it for 8 hours in a row. And if you didn't get hungry, right? And so it's like that is the life. But once again, our body is great at communicating. It's like, by the way, you need sustenance, buddy. Grumble, 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 right? So you listen to your body, right? So anyway, a lot of things come into intersection in that statement. What are you laughing about?
Well, because you said that it'd be like you sit down and play games, and you don't have parents, and then all of a sudden you get hungry. I remember when we were kids and we got that Nintendo. The OG Nintendo, the blow on the cartridges and stick it in Nintendo, and
Yeah,
how many times we sat in there and just played games for so many hours until one of us was finally like, I'm hungry. We need to go eat something.
right.
Saturdays were just like, it seems to me like every Saturday, but it was probably like maybe 3 to 5 Saturdays throughout a certain period of our lives, but that we would just play game after, just take turns, and but
Yeah,
the thing is that we did take turns. You and me and Ben, we took turns,
right.
and in doing so, we all enjoyed the game and we had peace. So kind of, it really fits that scenario that you're given. But I was laughing because of the hungry thing, because I totally identified with that. I remember that from our childhood, playing until we got.
Yeah, right. Right. And so that was my main point. But yeah, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a good time. It's supposed to be not worried about anything, just whatever you find to do, having fun doing it, and so that's Aaron's definition. But anyway, thank you for joining me for this episode, Tim. It was a treat. It was fun. There was a couple tears and a lot of laughter. What I expect, nothing more from our time together. So thank you.
Absolutely. And anytime that you want me to join you again, you just holler at me.
Yay. Well, I'll be hollering. Thanks for listening to our podcast. Tune in to Patreon and Facebook, and we're now on Red Note for more Rabbit Holes with Aaron. Thanks.